So welcome. It's time to do a fun springtime chore. We've got this load of manure along with an entire pile of manure that we're going to be spreading over the next couple days. We'll be using our trusty Ferguson TO30 tractor. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second to spread this manure. This is a Lancaster manure spreader that I've got on long-term loan from a neighbor of mine. So I appreciate that, Clarence. Anyways, that's the plan today at Tuckaway Acres Farm. All right, so a quick review of the equipment we're going to be using. So like I mentioned, this is a TO30 Ferguson tractor. Some of you might know what that is, and some of you might benefit from a little bit of a history lesson. So most of you are likely familiar with the early Ford versions of tractors. So this is post Fordson, which was a spinoff of Ford that was run by Henry Ford himself. Basically, he went to the board of directors at Ford and said, "Hey, this building cars thing is cool, but let's build a tractor." They said, "Hey, we know this whole thing's named after you and you're in charge of everything, but no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to keep building cars." So he said, "Cool. I'm going to take the money and the stuff that I know, and I'm going to make my own tractor company." So that was called Fordson. I want to say they ran that for 4 or 5 years, and it was a good tractor for the time. You know, it competed with a lot of other really good tractors of that era. But in 1939, they started building Ford tractors. So I guess Henry Ford was able to convince the board that, hey, I did this on this spinoff company. It was a really good idea. You know, Ford really should do this. And they finally listened to him. And so the first tractor they produced in mass production was a Ford 9N, and it was in 1939. That was a Ford flathead 4-cylinder engine, followed by a Ferguson powertrain. So the Ferguson powertrain was developed by Harry Ferguson, who was a guy that came over from Ireland. And his original thing he was into was designing implements to be pulled behind tractors and not necessarily tractors themselves. And so what he brought to Ford was the patent and the invention of the 3-point hitch, which is awesome because that's still generally the same 3-point hitch we use today. And so if you were to buy a Ford 1939 9N tractor, it would have a big Ford emblem right in the front of the hood. And then right under that, it would say the Ferguson system. That Ferguson system represented the transmission and the final running gear and the 3-point hitch mechanism that was a part of those Ford tractors. So Harry Ferguson and Ford were in the tractor business together through the 9N series. And then in 1942, they came out with the Ford 2N tractor. And they did that for a number of years. And then in 1948, Ford came out with the 8N tractor. And when the 8N tractor came out, they decided, or I guess I should say Ford decided that they were no longer interested in being partners with Harry Ferguson. And so they took that Ferguson system badge off the front of their tractor. They came out with a new model, and they parted ways with Harry Ferguson. I think because of the patents involved, Harry Ferguson had a pretty hefty lawsuit because they continued to use that exact same 3-point system on their 8N tractor like they did with their 2N tractor, but I don't think they were any longer in business with Harry Ferguson. So at the same time, not to be outdone by Ford, Harry Ferguson created his own line of tractor. The first version was the TO20, and basically was the same tractor as a Ford 8N from the engine back with a different engine. There was also some sheet metal distance, but from a powertrain perspective, it was the same tractor as an 8N, but instead of a Ford 4-cylinder engine in that, they purchased a Continental engine that was built out of Muskegon, Michigan, which is actually interesting because I live just north of Muskegon. So that plant is actually still there today, owned by actually L3 or whoever bought L3. But basically, they build tank powertrain in that same plant that this Continental engine was originally built in. So this is actually a Z129 engine, but in the TO20, it was a Z124, so that 124 number stood for displacement. This is a Z129 engine. They put those in whenever they went from the TO20 to the TO30. And then I think there was a TO35 that came later. That was a Z134 engine. And so all very similar construction, just a little bit larger displacement. And yeah, that's, I guess, a quick history overview of how the Ferguson tractor came to be. And then you'll still recognize that name today as within the Massey Ferguson line of tractors. So that same Ferguson that built this line of tractors by himself, later he went on to partner with originally Massey Harris Ferguson, and then later just Massey Ferguson. And so the I guess the name continues on. But this is kind of a cool piece of history, at least in my opinion, if you're interested in old tractor history. So I enjoy driving that. And then also, this particular tractor has been in my wife's family for at least the last 50 years. Her grandfather bought this tractor and took really good care of it and used it a lot on the farm for a number of years. And then we kind of took this over. It had a pretty significant mechanical issue, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It actually broke a crankshaft, and so I went through and we did a rebuild on this engine. It actually has Z134 internals because you can't buy Z129 parts anymore, but they all fit up. It's just a slightly larger displacement, works well. And yeah, we're really happy to have this tractor. It's great for the kind of job that it's going to do today. Pulling this manure spreader has got plenty of power for that. And it's a great utility tractor for us. So anyways, let's get this old girl back to work now that she's here out of winter storage, and we'll have some fun. So not to be outdone by our wonderful Ferguson tractor, here's our Lancaster manure spreader that we have on loan from a good neighbor of ours. So we do greatly appreciate that. This is a Lancaster spreader. I have been through it a little bit just to kind of do the maintenance items and make any corrections that were needed, which it wasn't much. This is a complete PTO, both the beaters on the back and the moving floor both run off the PTO, so you can spread manure without moving the wheels, which I think is somewhat unique to this tractor. I don't know a ton about manure spreaders, but as far as I think most of those are like fertilizer or lime spreaders, where the wheels themselves are actually what moves the floor, and then the beaters or the spinners are the only thing driving off the PTO. So in this case, everything's running off the PTO, and it's got some settings where you can adjust the rate at which the floor moves. We've got that turned down pretty low, since we're going to be trying to spread this manure over quite a few acres and try to make best use of it. So anyways, let's go ahead and get to work. So I've already made a couple mistakes with this video, and I'd like to correct one of those now. I've referenced what we're doing today as spreading manure, and that would do a great disservice to the material we're actually spreading. So this is actually compost. Let me get a big handful of this and I'll show it to you guys. If you can see that, it's basically, you might just call that black dirt. Doesn't have a strong pungent smell to it. It's wonderful. This is like liquid gold. This is like better than, anything you could possibly put in. This is as good as it gets. So we're real excited to spread this, and we won't call it manure because that's not what it is. Although there is certainly some amount of manure in this pile. But let's talk about specifically all the things that do make this, all the things that are included in this. So the first thing that probably makes up the largest percentage of what's here is wood chips. So everything, all the high nitrogen rich ingredients of this compost need some type of carbon source to bond with. And in our case, the cheapest and most readily available thing to bond those rich nitrogen sources with are wood chips. And most of the time we try to get free wood chips. Your best bet for that is working with a local tree service. So somebody that cuts down trees, nuisance trees in people's yard. They typically have a lot of wood chips on hand. And then if we are not able to source wood chips from a local tree guy, we also have a couple small scale sawmills around us. And although we do have to pay for wood chips we get from the sawmills, we are able to get those at a pretty affordable price point. We do use the dump truck to go get them, so we're not paying for transportation other than I guess the diesel fuel to get there. But we're just paying for the chips themselves, and that certainly helps. I think if you're paying to get wood chips dropped off, you're probably paying your highest premium. So we do try to avoid that. So what's in this other than wood chips? So we raise beef cattle year round. We do a spring and a fall slaughter or harvest, if you will, for our beef cattle. And then we raise forest edge pigs or forest edge hogs, which are hogs that are raised outdoors in a wood lot, and we raise those seasonally. So we get those normally end of April, beginning of May, and we're slaughtering those September, October timeframe typically. And so both those beef cattle that we harvest on farm and those hogs that we harvest on farm, all of those, all of the things that don't go to the processor for packaging stay here on the farm, and they get mixed with our wood chips, and then years later, typically 1 to 2 years later, they end up as compost. That's probably the main nitrogen rich source that we have to make really nice compost. In addition to that, we have chicken litter from our barn clean out from where we winter our chickens. We typically do that. We do a deep bedding for them, and we clean out our chicken, the chicken area within our barn about once a year, typically in the spring, and that will get added to the pile. And then the last source of kind of inputs to this manure pile is barn clean outs for folks that own horses near us. And so that's another good use of our dump truck. We're able to typically go there. Larger horse farms typically have a loader, so they allow me to use their equipment to load my truck and make trips back and forth. So I'm not having to drive a tractor over there. It's typically just drive my dump truck over there, use their equipment to load it up. And then they're happy to see those, that material go somewhere that's useful, because typically it's just a byproduct for horse farms. So I honestly probably with the amount of horses that are around me, I could probably get more horse manure or barn cleanouts from horse folks than I know what to do with. In fact, I think the stuff that's mixed into here is just from one family that has a couple horses, and that still makes up a pretty good, a good enough portion of our manure pile. But again, there's a lot in here. I keep calling it manure. That's really a disservice to what it is. It really is compost, although there is some amount of manure in it. Anyways, works out really good for us. Let's go ahead and get this stuff spread. Nice. You want to show everybody your chicken you caught?
Yeah.
What's her name?
Her name is Chicken.
Chicken's her name?
Yeah.
That's not very creative.
Her name is Bluey.
Bluey?
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. That's better. You want to take her to go spread some manure?
Yeah.
Or you want to leave her here?
I'll leave her here.
Okay. Well, let's set her down. Let's go spread some manure.
Yeah.
All right, come on.
I want to come.
All right, come with me. Let's go.
Come with her.
No, leave her here.
I want to.
All right, thank you.
Hey,
Well, that's going to do it for spreading compost. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I hope you have a good one. We'll see you next time.